cameras and those wonderful people out there in the dark. All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Hollywood has always been obsessed with youth, but in its relentless pursuit of perfection, has it sacrificed something even more valuable? Acting, at its core, is about expression. It is about the ability to communicate the deepest human emotions: grief, joy, fear, love, with nothing more than a look. What happens when those eyebrow twitches, furrowing of the forehead, or tremble of the lip disappear? In recent years, a growing number of actors have turned to Botox, fillers, and other cosmetic procedures to maintain a smooth, youthful appearance. While this may be effective in preserving a polished image, it has also led to a noticeable decline in the expressiveness of film performances. Some of the most emotionally charged scenes in cinematic history were carried by the subtlest facial movements: an arched brow, a shifting gaze, the way a forehead wrinkles in frustration or sorrow. These natural gestures are disappearing from modern film, leaving many performances feeling hollow, lifeless, and disconnected. As audiences begin to take notice, Hollywood is facing an unavoidable reckoning. Are we watching the slow death of expressive acting, or is there still time to reverse the trend? Chapter 1: A Golden Age of Emotion. Before the rise of Botox, actors relied entirely on the natural mobility of their faces to communicate emotion. Unlike today, where a scene's intensity is often amplified by dramatic dialogue or swelling orchestral music, classic Hollywood understood that the subtlest movements, a flicker of the eyes, a quiver of the lip, or a furrowed brow, could tell an entire story. This was particularly true in the early days of cinema, when expressive acting was not just encouraged but necessary. The silent film era demanded that actors to use their entire faces and bodies to convey emotion. Without dialogue, they had to rely on exaggerated expressions and movements to ensure that audiences could follow the story. This form of acting, often influenced by theater, required an acute awareness of how even the smallest facial shift could communicate a wide range of emotions. Actresses like Greta Garbo and Clara Bow mastered the art of silent expression, using their eyes, mouths, and subtle gestures to convey everything from heartbreak to ecstasy. Their performances felt raw, immediate, and deeply human because they were built on a foundation of emotional visibility rather than spoken words. Even with the advent of sound in cinema, this reliance on facial expression remained integral to film acting. Directors understood that the camera could capture nuances that stage acting never could, and close-ups became one of the most powerful storytelling tools in Hollywood. In classic films, the camera often lingered on an actor's face, allowing audiences to experience the depth of emotion through the natural tension in their features. Ingrid Bergman's close-ups in Casablanca, where her shifting gaze and barely perceptible lip quiver reveal more than a dialogue ever could, and they exemplified the power of this approach. Similarly, Montgomery Clift, in A Place in the Sun, is able to communicate profound sorrow and guilt with just a downward glance and tightening of the jaw. These performances didn't rely on excessive movement or extreme dialogue. They lived in the quiet, in the spaces between words, where human emotion is most palpable. Hollywood studios recognized the importance of expressive acting and trained their stars accordingly. Actors were put through rigorous courses in movement, facial control, and body language, ensuring that they could convey depth and complexity in the scene. Since early film cameras required intense lighting and specific awareness of framing, actors were trained to be accurately conscious of how their faces interacted with the camera. A raised eyebrow could be a defining moment. A lingering look could shift the entire tone of the film. The best actors of the time, Bette Davis, Marlon Brando, Vivian Leigh, understood how to use their faces as instruments of storytelling, creating performances that felt authentic and unforgettable. This reliance on facial expression made classic films feel more intimate and emotionally rich. Audiences could sense a character's thoughts and feelings without needing them to be explicitly stated. A single moment of hesitation, a flickering of uncertainty in the eyes, could convey an entire arc of internal conflict. These performances resonated because they were built on authenticity, on the simple but profound truth that human beings express themselves most powerfully through their faces. In today's Hollywood, this kind of acting has become increasingly rare. The once powerful close-up, which used to reveal an actor's inner world, now often feels empty. Many modern actors, whether due to Botox or broader shift in the industry expectations, lack the same dynamic range in their facial expressions. When a character is supposed to be experiencing grief, but their forehead remains unnaturally smooth, or when an actor's expressions no longer match the depth of their dialogue, audiences instinctively recognize that something is missing. Without expressive faces, the emotional core of film weakens. The best performances in cinematic history were defined by vulnerability, by faces that could communicate everything from joy to despair with a single look. As Botox and cosmetic interventions become more widespread, Hollywood risks losing one of the most fundamental storytelling tools. If an actor's face can no longer move in the way it once did, can they still deliver a performance that truly resonates? Chapter 2: The Rise of the Frozen Face. The pressure to maintain youthfulness has always been present in Hollywood, but the expectations have grown increasingly rigid over the decades. In the early years of film, actresses were expected to be glamorous, but there was still room for individuality in their appearances. Women like Bette Davis and Katharine Hepburn had distinctive faces, full of character and expressiveness, and they were celebrated for it. Even as they aged, their lines and wrinkles became part of their screen presence, adding depth to their performances rather than detracting from them. By the 1980s and 90s, however, the film industry began shifting towards an increasingly homogeneous beauty standard, one that demanded not only youthfulness, but a kind of flawlessness that left little room for variation. The rise of plastic surgery, fueled by Hollywood's obsession with perfection, began altering the industry's expectation. Actresses like Joan Collins and Jane Fonda, who were once admired for their natural beauty, started speaking openly about undergoing faceless and cosmetic enhancements to stay relevant in an industry that prioritized unlined faces. The introduction of Botox in the late 90s and early 2000s marks a turning point. Unlike traditional plastic surgery, Botox was non-invasive, relatively affordable, and in its early stages subtle. At first, it was marked primarily as a way to smooth out fine lines, without the downtime of surgery, but it quickly became an unspoken requirement for actresses hoping to maintain their careers beyond their 30s. The problem, however, was that Botox erased wrinkles. It also froze the muscles responsible for facial movement. This shift in beauty standards had a profound impact on film performances. Historically, audiences were accustomed to seeing characters experience emotions not just through words, but through micro-expressions. Small, instinctual muscle movements that reveal subtle feelings like doubt, hesitation, or suppressed anger. These micro-expressions are not just part of acting, they're a fundamental part of human communication. We read about other people's emotions based on the movements on their faces, whether it's the quick arch of an eyebrow in suspicion or the tiny tremor of a lip before tears began to fall. But Botox disrupts this process. By paralyzing the very muscles that allow for these natural expressions, it creates a disconnect between what the actor is saying and what the face is conveying. This is why modern performances sometimes feel strangely off. Even when an actor is delivering an emotional line, a character might be expressing heartbreak, but if their forehead remains immobile and their eyes do not widen or narrow in resonance to their feelings, the audience subconsciously registers the scene as inauthentic. This problem has become particularly noticeable in genres that rely heavily on close-ups and raw emotional performances, such as dramas and psychological thrillers. In classic films, close-ups were used as a storytelling device, capturing every detail of an actor's expression in a way that heightened the emotional impact of a scene. Think of the way the camera lingers on Maria's tear-streaked face in The Passion of Joan of Arc in 1928, or the intensity of Al Pacino's quiet fury in The Godfather. These performances are powerful, precisely because the actors' faces tell the story just as much as the words do. However, in modern films, the close-up has become a less effective tool. Directors who once relied on the expressive power of their actors' faces now find themselves compensating in other ways. Some filmmakers have resorted to heavy-handed musical cues to signal emotions that the actor's face cannot fully express. Others lean in on exaggerated dialogue or dramatic camera work to create intensity where a single look could have once been enough. This has led to a shift in the way films are edited, with quicker cuts and more frequent reaction shots being used to artificially inject emotion into scenes that feel visually stagnant. And the impact of Botox on film is not just limited to individual performances, it has altered the way stories are told. In earlier decades, an entire scene could be built around an actor's reaction. Think of the famous moment in Gone with the Wind when Scarlett O'Hara, played by Vivien Leigh, silently absorbs the devastation of the Civil War, her face shifting from despair to determination without a single word. Today, scenes like this are rare. When actors' faces do not move naturally, directors have little choice but to rely on external elements, lighting, camera angles, special effects, to compensate for the loss of expressive ability. This problem is especially evident in the rise of CGI AI, assisted facial enhancements in blockbuster films. In recent years, technology has been used to de-age actors or smooth out their features, creating a bizarre in-between effect where performers neither look young nor old, but artificially suspended in time. And I did notice this in that new Tom Hanks movie where he's with, I can't remember her name, but Ginny from Forrest Gump, and they're like, the whole movie takes place in one room, and the movie starts with them being really young, and like it looks like Tom Hanks young, but there's just something off about it. It's really weird that they're able to do this now, and I'm pretty sure in some of Nicole Kidman's movies, she's been like, maybe it's in her clause that they have to like artificially de-age her or smooth her, because there's some recent movies I watched with her, and something was really weird, like her neck looked artificially smooth or something. And the result is a sense of detachment that makes it harder for audiences to emotionally connect with the characters. And this is why many viewers found the digitally de-aged Robert De Niro in The Irishman unsettling. That movie was kind of the first time I saw that in the mainstream film. And while his face looked younger, his expressions lacked the natural fluidity that made his earlier performances so compelling. So if you think of like Goodfellas and like Casino, like when he was younger, like it's just different because he still looks smooth. It is interesting that they have the technology to do that, because then maybe a lot of older actors who might not be getting as many roles, we can like take them back in time and make them look young. And I think they'll probably have the ability to even make dead actors come to life too, like Marilyn Monroe or James Dean. And the prevalence of Botox and other cosmetic interventions has also contributed to a growing uniformity in Hollywood's aesthetic. In the past, actresses were allowed to have a variety of looks. Some had sharp, angular features, others had soft, rounded faces. Today, however, there's an increasing sameness among performers, particularly women, as many undergo similar cosmetic procedures that erase the individuality of their features. This has led to criticism that Hollywood is losing some of its most compelling screen presences in favor of bland, homogeneous beauty standards. Despite the growing backlash, Botox remains deeply entrenched in the entertainment industry. For many actors, the choice is not simply as rejecting cosmetic procedures outright. There's still immense pressure to conform to Hollywood's expectations, and those who choose to age naturally often find themselves facing fewer job opportunities. While some actresses have successfully pushed back against this pressure, think of Frances McDormand, Tilda Swinton, and Sarah Jessica Parker, for example. The majority still feel compelled to maintain a youthful appearance even at the expense of their craft. And the consequences of this trend are becoming increasingly clear. As Botox and fillers continue to dominate Hollywood, the very essence of what makes film acting compelling, the ability to communicate complex emotions through facial expressions, is being diminished. The best performances in film history were built on the ability of actors to fully inhabit their characters, using their faces as instruments or storytelling. If that ability is lost, what does it mean for the future of cinema? Will audiences continue to accept emotionally hollow performances, or will the backlash against Botox eventually lead to the return of more natural expressive acting? For now, the frozen face remains a defining feature of modern Hollywood, a testament to the industry's ongoing struggle between artistic integrity and the relentless pursuit of youth. Whether this trend will continue or filmmakers and audiences will demand a return to authenticity remains an open question. It is true, I noticed because recently I watched Legally Blonde, and then like a few days later I watched Reese Witherspoon's new movie, that like wedding one with Will Ferrell. I think it's on Amazon. And I didn't notice any of these things when I was younger because growing up, like Botox wasn't readily available, so I just didn't notice these things. And then now, looking back at Reese Witherspoon's forehead and her eyebrows in Legally Blonde, there's so much emotion and movement. And then if you look at her newer films, like it's completely frozen around her forehead and everything. There's just no expressiveness. And I do understand why she gets it. Like I do get that. It'd be interesting to go back and watch the movie Walk the Line, because that's the movie she won the Oscar for, and just see how her forehead moves. I'm actually curious. I used to love that movie. I haven't seen it in a long time because that was maybe 2006 or 7 when she won that Oscar. So I'm curious. But yeah, there's just something different. And I think young people who grow up now watching film will just be used to that aesthetic, that they won't realize what it used to look like when actors had tons of movements in their faces, unless they really went back and started watching older movies, like maybe pre-2005 and below, probably. And I think the huge shift was probably more so after 2010, but I think Botox became more mainstream like post-2005. So chapter 3, Hollywood's ageism and the pressure to stay young. Botox is not just an individual decision. It is the byproduct of a much larger issue within Hollywood. The entertainment industry has long imposed unrealistic beauty standards on women, and nowhere is it more apparent than its testament to aging actresses. While male actors are often allowed to grow older naturally, even being celebrated for their distinguished, rugged appearance, appearances, women are met with a far harsher reality. Aging is framed as a problem to be solved, and to be delayed at all costs. This double standard has existed for decades, but as cosmetic procedures like Botox have become more accessible, the pressure for actresses to maintain a youthful appearance has reached unprecedented levels. Historically, male actors have been able to transition into new roles as they age, often receiving more respect and gravitas in the process. Leading men like Paul Newman, Clint Eastwood, and Harrison Ford continue to thrive in their careers well into their 60s and 70s. I mean, Harrison Ford's still acting. I mean, Clint Eastwood's still directing, taking on complex roles that reflected their age and experience. Their weathered faces became symbols of wisdom, authority, and depth. In contrast, actresses who age out of their 20s and 30s are often sidelined, struggling to find work that extends beyond playing mothers, grandmothers, or secondary characters. For many actresses, the pressure to maintain their youthful looks is relentless. Once they reach their 40s, meaningful roles become scarcer, and those that remain are often far less dynamic than the characters they were offered in their younger years. Actresses who once played leading roles in dramas or action films are often reduced to playing the supportive wife or the aging matriarch, while their male co-stars continue to command top billing roles. The industry has sent a clear message: if you want to keep working, you must look as young as possible for as long as possible. The pressure has driven many actresses to turn to Botox, fillers, facelifts, and other cosmetic interventions. For some, it starts subtly, a few injections here and there to smooth out the fine lines, but over time, these procedures become routine, leading to the frozen, unnatural expressions that have become common in Hollywood. The expectation is so ingrained that it is rarely even discussed. It is simply understood that an actress of a certain age must take measures to maintain her appearance if she wants to remain relevant. Those who refuse to participate in the system often find themselves at a disadvantage when it comes to casting. I also think that the audiences and the media are ruthless too. If people, maybe these actresses didn't get, Botox and other things done, I think people would be harsh, saying, oh, they need to get work done, they're too old, they're washed up, why, I don't want to see that. So it's kind of like catch-22. And yet, paradoxically, some of the most celebrated actresses working today are those who have openly rejected the industry's beauty standards. I mean, even if you think of Meryl Streep, Frances McDormand, and they've been very vocal of Hollywood's obsession with youth and refusing Botox and cosmetic procedures in favor of allowing their face to age naturally. Frances McDormand's performances in films like Nomadland and 3 Billboards Outside Missouri have been praised for their raw, unfiltered authenticity. Also, there's Kate Winslet, who has spoken out against the pressure to undergo cosmetic enhancements, arguing that the true acting requires the ability to express genuine emotion, and their willingness to embrace aging has not harmed their careers. In fact, it has strengthened them, allowing them to take on deeply complex, emotionally rich roles that demand nuance and depth. At the same time, actresses who have undergone extensive Botox treatments often find themselves facing a different kind of scrutiny. While the industry rewards youthful appearances, audiences are beginning to push back against the performances that feel overly artificial. And I also think that a lot of this has to do with just how talented you are as an actress. I mean, Kate Winslet is incredibly talented, as well as Meryl Streep, so I think a lot of the roles where it's just relying on your looks is more for people too that just aren't as talented, and they were getting roles based on their appearance. And when an actor's face appears too smooth, too untouched by time, it can create an unsettling effect that makes it difficult for viewers to fully invest in the character. And it's true, they're coming across as super cold and just flat because you don't feel connected to them, then the movie just isn't as good. And this phenomenon sometimes is referred to the uncanny valley effect. It occurs when a person's face looks human, but lacks the natural expressiveness that makes them feel real. In film, where emotional connection is everything, this can be a major problem. And the backlash against Hollywood's obsession with eternal youth is visible in the growing demand for authentic storytelling. And audiences who are responding more positively to actors who look real, who age naturally, and who bring genuine emotional depth to their performances. And with television in particular, has become a space where older actors are finding more opportunities to play lead roles. Series like The Mar of Easttown and The White Lotus has featured actresses in their 40s and 50s who are allowed to look their age without excessive cosmetic alterations. The success of these projects suggests that Hollywood's outdated approach to aging may be sustainable forever. I mean, for me, I just want something good with good acting. I don't care how old the person is. I don't care if they get Botox or not. I guess it just depends on the film and the plot. And I mean, sometimes obviously the aesthetically overly Botox person might fit into a certain role. And despite these positive changes, the industry will still have a long way to go. And the expectation for women to remain perpetually youthful is deeply ingrained. And while some actresses have managed to push back, many still feel trapped by the unspoken rules of Hollywood. Until the entertainment industry stops equating a woman's worth to her appearance, Botox and other procedures filmmakers will remain a necessity for many actresses. And the question remains, will Hollywood finally recognize the value of authenticity, or will it continue to prioritize artificial perfection over raw human emotion? I think a lot of the big directors like Martin Scorsese, I've read articles about them speaking out that they don't necessarily want actresses who are overly frozen. Like a really good director, and it's a true craft for you in art, like you want someone that's going to be able to convey the emotion for your film. And I think if audiences too are starting to demand more realistic portrayals of aging, then maybe the pressure to stay young will change, but who knows. Chapter 4, how Botox changes filmmaking itself. The widespread use of Botox in Hollywood is not just affecting individual performances, it is reshaping the way films and television shows are made. Directors who once relied on an actor's ability to deliver powerful, wordless performances now find themselves compensating for the loss of facial expressions. The fundamental tools of cinematic storytelling, from close-ups to subtle emotional beats, have had to adapt to an industry where many actors' faces no longer move as naturally as they once did. And one of the most significant changes is the increasing reliance on dramatic music and an overly exaggerated dialogue to convey emotions that used to be expressed visually. In the past, filmmakers often trusted their actors to communicate feelings through micro-expressions, small instinctive movements that reveal everything from heartbreak and suspicion. And I do love those long, close-ups from older films where you can just see the emotion coming from their face. Even in Breakfast at Tiffany's, at the end scene where she's crying in the rain with the cat, like you can really see the emotion on her face. A lingering close-up of an actor's face could be more powerful than an entire monologue. Think of directors like David Lean, Sidney Lumet, and Sofia Coppola have all used this technique to immerse audiences in characters' internal world. But as Botox limits actors' ability to create emotion, filmmakers are forced to find other ways to ensure the audience understand the emotions being portrayed. Overbearing music cues, heavy-handed exposition, and frequent reaction shots have become common crutches to compensate for the lack of expressive range in modern performances. Scripts have also changed in response to the shift. In older films, subtext played a crucial role in storytelling. Characters once said one thing, while their expression revealed something deeper. Take In the Mood for Love from the year 2000, where Tony Leung and Maggie Cheung's restrained performances convey more longing and heartbreak through stolen glances and subtle facial shifts than words ever could. This kind of storytelling has become increasingly difficult when many actors lack the ability to make small yet essential expressions. To compensate, modern scripts often spell out emotions explicitly, removing the nuances and depth that once defined great screenwriting. It's kind of sad to think of that. Even those like romantic drama movies like The Notebook, like I don't even think they were using Botox when that film was made. So it's just interesting because I feel like you can't even recreate those love stories anymore. And close-ups, once one of the most powerful tools in filmmaking, are now used more cautiously. In classic Hollywood, directors understood the power of that single look. Think of The Way in The Good and the Bad and Ugly from 1966 relies on the extreme close-ups in its final standoff, where every twitch of the eye, the tightening of the jaw, builds unbearable tension. In contrast, many modern films are avoiding these lingering close-ups because of Botox, as a lack of natural movement can make these movements feel static and unconvincing. And it's true, you could never do that with a completely Botox forehead and eyes, because you just see the eyes and then be nothing moving. And I feel like that's why Nicole Kidman is coming across as very cold in a lot of her recent roles, and instead filmmakers resort to quick cuts, erratic editing to create emotional intensity, reducing the impact of what could have been a deeply immersive scene. The impact of Botox on performance is especially noticeable in television, where long-form storytelling relies heavily on the audience's ability to connect with characters on an emotional level. Shows that emphasize realism and natural acting tend to resonate more with the audience, as they offer performances that feel grounded and relatable. Take the TV show The Maid from 2021 starring Margaret Qualley, whose deeply expressive performance carried the emotional weight of the series. Her ability to convey exhaustion, hope, and despair through her eyes, her furrowed brows, and the tension in her face made the show feel authentic and immersive. And funny story is I did background acting in that show because it was filmed in Victoria where I live, and I did a few scenes with her like in the background. Like it's not like I actually like spoke to her. And there's one scene where I was like eating like this fake French fries and stuff, and then she like told the director, she's like, that looks so fake, you need to get her better props. I don't know, it was funny. Her character struggles were not just heard in her voice, but they were seen in every moment of her quiet contemplation. If her face had been artificially frozen, much of the depth would have been lost. Similarly, the show Euphoria has been widely praised for its raw performances, particularly Zendaya's portrayal of Rue, a young woman struggling with addiction. Her ability to express pain and desperation and vulnerability through her face without needing to over-explain her emotion has been one of the show's greatest greatest strengths. These performances stand out because they embrace imperfection. They allow emotions to play out naturally, rather than being smoothed over by artificial enhancements. In contrast, many actors in mainstream Hollywood films deliver performances that feel restrained, not because of their acting abilities, but because their faces lack the flexibility needed to fully embody their characters' emotions. And casting choices have also started shifting as a result of these changes. Directors looking to create emotionally engaging stories are increasingly turning to actors who have not succumbed to excessive cosmetic procedures. Shows like The Handmaid's Tale have been successful in part because of the raw, unfiltered performance of the cast. Think of Elizabeth Moss in particular, who brings an intense vulnerability to her role, using every muscle in her face to communicate her character's internal struggles. The show relies heavily on close-ups, and Moss's expressive range allows those moments to be some of the most emotionally charged in television today. Had she opted for the same kind of facial treatments that many actresses feel pressure to undergo, her performance might not have been resonated as powerfully. Even in genre television, where spectacle often takes center stage, audiences are drawn to performances that feel authentic. In The Queen's Gambit, Anya Taylor-Joy delivers a subtle yet mesmerizing portrayal of a chess prodigy grappling with addiction and loneliness. Much of the show's power comes from her ability to convey Beth Harmon's thoughts and emotions without excessive dialogue. A raised eyebrow, a slight tightening of the lips, or a flicker of hesitation in her gaze tells the audience everything they need to know. The effectiveness of her performance underscores just how vital facial expression is in storytelling. As Botox and other cosmetic procedures become more prevalent, filmmakers must either adapt their techniques or seek out actors who have not had this work done. And many directors have embraced more stylized forms of filmmaking to accommodate these limitations. Others are pushing back because they want authenticity. And the success of television series that highlight raw, unfiltered performances suggests that audiences are beginning to crave realism. And ultimately, the rise of Botox in Hollywood has led to a fundamental shift in the way the films are being made. While directors once relied on this expressiveness, now they are using all different external elements like editing and music to change everything, which is kind of sad because I really love the look and rawness of old films from the 20th century. And it's just, I don't know, it's just different. And I feel bad for people that are young now and didn't get to experience that when they were younger. So can Hollywood turn back? Hollywood's reliance on Botox has undoubtedly altered the landscape of modern acting. But there is that backlash and a shift on the horizon. And I think the cream will always rise to the top. And I think the truly talented actors and actresses will most likely not want to get Botox. And I saw her on her Instagram using frownies, so maybe that'll be the thing. I mean, I feel like that's what I would do. If I knew I had a big role coming up, I just wouldn't get Botox and let it wear off. And then if you're not filming, get it as preventative in between. So anyways, it's an interesting concept. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on Botox and film and if you think it's ruining film and acting. All right, thanks for watching.